Hi folks, I'm going to build a water-cooled system for my XPS 8930. So the parts of that I have to add to the system are a power supply that will handle the situation, a water-blocked video card, and a water loop. So I'm going with EK. So this is the XPS 8090. It's currently got GTX 170 in it. That's air cooled. Looking at the internals of the XPS 8930, there's not really a lot of room for various bits and pieces. So my thoughts are I will mount the new heat exchange, the radiator, etc. on the outside. That's on the cover of the unit, which means it will stick outside, and I'll show you that cover shortly. All the parts and the cover that I'm actually going to use to mount it on. Okay, here I am in the garage, and the most complicated part of the work is actually to fabricate the mounting, because here we're mounting this new system on a device that doesn't have the standard fittings and capability to mount it. So in our case, we've got the XPS 8930, which I'll just show you the metal part of the outer casing. And this is it. This is the metal part of the outer casing. There's obviously there is a plastic part that basically sits over the top of that and makes it look all good. But I'm taking off that part and using the metal part to do the rest of the mounting. Now it just slides off. But as you can see, there's a couple of holes that I've actually had to punch through the mesh, and two holes up the top here, the ones that look freshly drilled and a little bit scuffed, these two, that I have drilled as well. Now, I'm going to reuse part of the mesh, the holes in the mesh, to provide the rest of the mounting. To make sure that I actually got the positions right, I made a template of where I would need the holes out of paper, traced it from the actual radiator. That's what the radiator footprint is going to look like, and then punched out the holes. Now there's a fair bit more to do in terms of making sure everything's smooth and neat. I'll follow through in the next bit. So after grinding it, really just a drill mounted grinding bit, I've managed to make it a little bit rounder and just fitting. As you can see, the unit goes through cleanly. And that's the intent. The grinding item or grinding stone that I used basically is that conical one. I mounted on a drill. It was an old one, so I didn't mind that it actually did destroy the conical bit anyway. It was partly damaged in the first place. So the complexity of this is the fact that the fittings for the radiator are about 20 mil, less than 20 mil in height, and unless I wanted to make a larger hole and let that poke through, I needed to lift the radiator off the surface, and so that's what I've done. I've made it a little bit more complicated for myself, and I've bought two 10 by 20 mil height, one 10 by 20 mil height aluminium rail, aluminium rectangular form, cut them, drilled holes so that the screws can be mounted through, and I'm going to test mount them before I proceed. Here's the radiator as it was mounted. Now, my careful measurements didn't actually quite work out quite that well, as you will see shortly. I'm going to turn this over. And lo and behold, that hole does not line up. So I am going to have to expand that hole. That hole doesn't line up. So I'm going to expand that hole, and there's the screws mounting the radiator, and there's the aluminium rail on which it sits, giving enough room for airflow. So here's the view of the 8930. It's pretty fancy swing out power supply. And here's the new RM850 that I'm going to replace it with. The chassis for the radiator, etc., partly completed, all mounted, as you can see. There are the fittings. I haven't cut the tubing yet, just put it in. And there's still 2 more holes to be made, because I need to work out the actual length, the appropriate length for it. So let's first up upgrade this to the 850. Now 850 is going to be longer, so it doesn't quite fit. Got to take that off and adjust that. All right. There it is. Taken out the screws, left that boring bit out. Let's fit the little bugger in. 850 and upwards. Which one of these silent ones? Yep, it goes in there. Beautiful. Simply modular. It's a lovely thing about these things. This has got modular fittings. I haven't unplugged the rest yet. I'm going to fit them as I unplug them. Right. Theoretically, this is what it's supposed to look like in the end. It's obviously not complete, as there's still a bit of tubing to be sorted out. But essentially, that is now the new radiator and pump attached to the PC. But obviously, the internals haven't been sorted out yet. But the new power system has been put in. Let's open that up to show you that. Simple way. Open, sesame, and there's the power, new power. We'll test the power. The tubing obviously is just some mess. It's not going anywhere. It's just looped. But we'll see what that works out in the next short while. Okay, here's the new system. Obviously without the water cooling at the moment, but here's the new system, and the PC with new power, the 850X in place, and it's running beautifully silent. The water block install for my motherboard requires me to add a rubber gasket in the back of the motherboard, so that's a little bit more work. I am looking that will be a bit of work to do. This is the gasket and metal plate that sits in the back once it's done. This is the motherboard, and so I actually have to take the motherboard out of the case to put the unit, the backing plate and rubber gasket on. Next, I need to size the tubing so it fits. So to do that, I've got to fit everything in roughly and see how that goes. I'm also putting in a Corsair Commander Pro in to measure temperatures and to deal with the fans. So we'll also need to sort out how to fit that. Positioning the various pieces where they're roughly going to sit, I have a rough idea that that is going to be about there. So I'll cut it there, and that will allow me to fit the unit. Here's the final cooling loop before it's actually run tested. Once it's run tested and I've fitted the appropriate pieces for the backing plate, it will go into the, then we'll paste it in and all that. But I'll run test it independent of the motherboard to make sure there's no leaks, and I'll place a just on that there'll be a paper towel to help detect any leaks. All right. Okay, first attempt, there are leaks, so I actually have to fix the leaks before I proceed. What I did is I used distilled water or demineralized water to do this, so I haven't actually wasted the coolant. So I have to empty out the water, and the easiest way to do that is to disconnect it at the graphics card, because it doesn't seem to be having that much water there, and to lift the entire thing up as high as possible so it basically all empties out into that container just over here. All right, let's try that. Okay, so here's the problem. There's leaks. So I need to make sure before I start there's no leaks, that everything's really tight and sealed. So I have had to rejig a rig so that I can actually see that there's no leaks. So here it goes. I'm going to start filling it. I'm using demineralized water. So far so good. There were leaks here previously, and that seems to be all cleared. So we now need to, I'm going to turn this thing on and see if I can push it to pump some water. And then once it's pumped, once it goes through the whole loop, then I can be certain that there's no leaks. Here it is. You can see the bubbles going through, meaning that the thing is actually pumping through. So here I have added in the EK Cryofuel Clear. What I've done is I'm in the process of running the 24-hour run-in, and so effectively I've put in the cryofuel so that it will mix through the entire system. I've checked that there's no leaks, so essentially it's ready to be installed. The only part that needs to be done now is the bracketing on the underside of the motherboard and setting it all up, connecting it up, and then getting the new cards working. So this is the final phase. Everything's been tested out, except for perhaps the lighting. That'll come in the next couple of weeks, I think, because I've got to wait for the last part in terms of a USB header cable to connect the Commander Pro. But the water loop's tested for over 24 hours, and now it's time to assemble the units into the PC. So I'll show you shortly. After much difficulty trying to sort out how to mount the backplate, I've had to modify the way it's put up. So let's swing to the unit. And here it is. So here we've got the original screw, two alternate screws holding the chip in. I may have bent the pins, which means I might have stuffed the board. And on the back, three different screws. Now I'm going to mount that piece and we'll go from there. Okay, so the bolts are in, everything's in. I haven't put the last 5 screws in yet, but everything's plugged in. as it was before. And now we put in the new cooling system. Okay, so here's this hanging precariously, just as before I put the whole thing in. Got to take the rubber out of the bottom of that. Okay, so the graphics card's seated. Now for the CPU. I've put it in, but looks like there's going to be kinks in the tubing, so I've got to find a way to fix that. Final test in place. Adjusted the fittings, so I've actually got 2 extra fittings. This basically means this unit, when it comes down, doesn't squash the tubing, the water loop, and limit its performance. So also the Cortex Commander Pros installed. The fans basically are coming off Cortex. These fans over here coming off the Cortex. Only waiting for a cable to connect to USB, and we have everything sorted there. So just going to run it for a little bit of time, because when I did check it last, the cable was kinked, and even though it didn't leak, that's good, but I moved around so it's no longer kinked, and there was a little bit of a leak, so I'm just going to leave it to dry out while it continues its test check run. So there you go. There's about 800 mils in the tank, in the whole system. And we will go to a full system startup with the new graphics card and see how it all goes. Okay, so time to put the paste in and screw it all down. So that's the last ones. I need to make sure it's balanced. Yep, let's firm in. Tighten that up. All right, now to check it out. Power on. Fans are going. And screen. Okay, I now have pressed the escape button. Hopefully it's loading the testing. Fans still going. Hold on. This is started up. That is started up. So after restarting and then hitting escape to get to the repair screen and then restarting again, system has come up, and now I'm running the NVIDIA system and it's downloaded and preparing the package, having updated the system. Let's see how we go. It does seem a lot faster, but we'll see. Okay, so here I am downloading. 1 minute left. IQ4, and we'll see how that sets up in terms of the fan speeds, etc. shortly. So here's the base configuration. Obviously the Corsair Commander Pro is not configured in it yet because there is no USB connection to it. That will have to wait till the connector arrives, and then I'll do a follow-up. Okay folks, so here's sort of the finished product. That's the PC that's been built, now running for a couple of weeks. It seems stable. There's been a few adjustments to it. Still waiting on the serial cable, and so there's no lights and fancy bits. It's done the video that we've basically run. This is the setup I've now got. And the laptop and the other screen basically are separate to that, but the 3 screens basically are run by that single PC down below.